Welcome to Inside the Force. I'm Greg Grunberg, a.k.a. Snap Wexley.
It is a period of Star Wars mania, as new movies, comic books, novels, and TV shows populate the system. Fueled by their love and passion for the galaxy far, far away, two exceptional geeks tap into hundreds of holocrons in order to bring you the knowledge and insight of all things Star Wars. Come and join them as they go inside the Force.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Inside the Force. Thanks for joining us. Dave Cottingham here. And with me, all the way from the West Coast, Los Angeles, my buddy Mat Raney. What's up, brother?
What's up, dude?
You know, I was just searching on whether or not you've been on this show, and I don't think you have.
Well, we've only known each other for like 1,000 years, so
yes.
I mean, I know I've been on shows with you,
Of course.
but we're not sure if it was one of these shows. It might have been the 21 podcast,
Yes.
but I don't know if I've been on Force Awakens.
Inside the Force.
Inside the Force.
We just mentioned Force Awakens earlier, but the
Yes.
yeah, so we do have longtime listeners of the show, and longtime listeners meaning that they knew us when we started under the whole 21 network, where we had multiple shows going. We still have a couple of those, but Raney was a big, Raney's always been a big part of the family, the 21 family.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, you've been on other shows, but I cannot believe, I don't think we've had you on Inside the Force.
But now I am inside the Force.
Yes,
Now.
and I'm going to look this up and correct myself next week just in case. But welcome. How's the
Thank you.
How's the West Coast going?
Man, it's good. It's good. You know, I've been out, this year I've been out here for 10 years. I've been out here a full decade now, which is kind of weird. But, I mean, in some ways it's been pretty well. It's been going pretty well. I've got 4 books out, 4 novels. I've got, hopefully the 5th one going to join them here pretty soon. I've got an agent in New York, working to sell that 5th book, and hopefully that goes through. I've won some awards for my books, so that's been nice, but I still have not, become rich or married like, a supermodel. So I don't know. I feel like, somewhere when I was like 24, I was like, yeah, I'll write books and I'll make a lot of money, and, I'll have this, a house in California and stuff like those things. That part did not happen, but I am a writer. So I have checked off one box.
It still could happen.
It still could happen.
You're very young, so it doesn't really.
But all the writers all the writers I know out here, I mean, they've all got side work and things like that. Anyone who thinks that, by becoming a novelist is the short road to, the rich life, maybe reconsider that.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Hilarious. Well, that's great. That's funny. And then, Raney and I have known each other for, like you said, a long time. I would say close to almost 20 years. And I will say that the one thing, obviously, because we knew each other, then you actually moved away for a few years before coming back to Kentucky. And when you did, it was when we were in development of our first fan film, the Unknown Discovery. And
that is right.
And Raney, I'll never forget, because we saw each other at an award show. And you just got back in town, and you were asking me what we were up to, and I said, yeah, well, I've got this crazy idea for this fan film, but it's a comedy type. And you were like, yeah, well, can I help out? What can I do? And I looked at you, and I looked at you up and down, and I said, can you wear a stormtrooper outfit?
It is literally almost the reverse of, you're a little short for a stormtrooper, aren't you? You're actually the right size for a stormtrooper.
Exactly, right?
Like, yes, I am. Yes, I am.
So
I'm not too short to be a stormtrooper. That thing actually fit pretty well.
It did. No.
How many times did I end up wearing that thing? I feel like I wore that thing many times.
Well, I mean, you weren't one day that shoot for that film, and then Matt wrote the prequel to that movie,
Yes.
Rise of the Troopers. And
how many views do those things have?
Oh, well, Rise of the Troopers went off. I posted that thing on because YouTube wasn't around when we did these movies.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, wow. We just really dated ourselves.
Yeah, totally. Right. Fan films alone weren't really that done then. I mean, at the time we did on Discovery, Troops was the big one.
Yeah,
but that was almost 10 years old. That was like 8 years old by the time we did ours. So,
and it was brilliant. I mean, that was genius.
When we did it, we if you count, we took 300 DVDs up to Celebration 3, gone in a matter of minutes. Our website crashed because of people, trying to watch the movie. But 2007 when we did Rise of the Troopers, again we put it out on DVD. We went to Celebration 4. Remember that we went out to LA for Celebration 4. And handed out all the discs out then, kind of a double feature thing with both our films. Now, I did upload them up to YouTube eventually once we started getting going on our channel there. And yeah, Rise of the Troopers has got hundreds of thousands of views on there.
Well, and it was unfortunate because, by the time we had uploaded that, to that format, I mean, people were starting to do some really crazy next level fan films. Like, I mean, not to say that ours, our effort wasn't excellent or anything like that, but I mean, people were doing like, full on green screen, in TIE fighter, lightsaber battle, kind of stuff.
Oh, I mean, visual effects, visual effects.
Oh my God. Like people were putting years of work into those things. So,
yeah. And then now it's even a different level. And I will tell you, Rains, because I haven't told you this yet.
What?
I'm actually, and this is actually the first time I'm mentioning this on the show. Actually, me and Casey have hinted at it, but I'm working on special edition versions of our fan film. I am updating the visual effects of our movies.
Wow. Well, I think you owe it to George Lucas to somehow insert midichlorians into our our special editions. Like somehow they need to go in there. Although I will tell you this, so we'll maybe get a little bit next level geek just for a second.
Yeah,
I was reading online what Lucas was saying about what his original prequel or sequel series would have been about.
Yes.
And he was talking about the midichlorians and the wills and all that sort of stuff. Now, the midichlorians, from what I've read, it's a little bit hard to tell when the midichlorians kind of, developed in his mind, when that seed German idea. I feel like it was after the original trilogy, but
I think so.
If you read the original Star Wars novels, the novel edition of the first Star Wars, which has some really interesting differences between the film, and I can't remember how I got a hold of a copy of that. My mom got it for me. We were living overseas at the time. I don't know where she got it from, but the novelization. It was very popular at the time for science fiction novels to have these sort of like interstitials, these before the chapters, there were these preceding parts where, it was like something excerpted from a text that pertained to that universe, right. A fictional text, kind of like Dune did that. I think Dune was the one that really popularized that technique. And so these excerpts were written. A lot of them were these histories written by Princess Leia. And one of them was called, and someone out there in the fandom knows for sure, but it was something like the history of the wills, or, the legend, like that was the name of the text.
The Journal of the Wills.
The Journal of the Wills. Thank you.
Yes.
The Journal of the Wills. So that existed that idea did exist
Originally, correct.
Originally, that was originally part of that the universe. So
correct.
I remembered reading it right when I hadn't thought about it for forever, but as soon as he said that, I remember reading the novelized version and the Journal of the Wills, and I was like, well, he really did have a grand vision, at the time.
Yes.
So,
well, I think
I would have been interested in seeing that.
I think I'm pretty sure Journal of the Wills was the original name before Star Wars, because the original script was From the Journey of the Wills, The Adventures of Luke Starkiller was the original script. So it was this whole from the book of the Journey of the Wills. So what the wills were, I'm not sure if that was ever really defined. I don't know if it was ever defined. I don't know
if he ever said it, other than it was in his mind. And there was this Journal of the Wills that we didn't know what was in the Journal of the Wills.
Correct.
Other than the story of Luke Starkiller later, Skywalker.
Right. Because I think each, instead of being Star Wars, it was going to be Journey of the Wills, and then whatever title it was for the story. But yeah, very interesting. In fact, that was one of my news stories that you kind of brought up. So
I usurped your news story.
No, it's perfect.
I'm sorry.
No, but anyway, going back real quick. But that's I just want to make sure everybody gets that Raney. We have a big history together, and we've always talked Star Wars. And as you find out in this episode, for sure. Raney's got a lot of opinions of and story opinions, because you are a storyteller, you're a writer, so you see a lot of things that I think a lot of people don't see, and you have a lot of stronger opinions than some people do on story and character development and stuff like that. So we'll get into that.
Absolutely.
Real quick, I'll run through a couple of news items that did hit this past week that you might be interested in, Rains. But
all right,
the big news actually just came out today that it is highly rumored and possibly confirmed. I'll credit the source here being from Fantha Tracks, but they apparently have double confirmed with sources that Billy D. Williams is going to be in episode 9.
Oh, it's about time.
I know, right?
It's about time.
Yes, so Billy D. Williams, Lando, is apparently going to show up in episode 9. Where he's been, well, I guess we'll find out. So that's big news. The other one is Favreau's live action series is apparently scheduled to shoot starting this fall. That's going to come out next fall, 2019, on the Disney streaming service.
That's fast.
You excited about that?
I'll be honest with you. I don't know as much about the TV stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't follow that as much as the films. So I'm not really sure what his TV series is supposed to be based around. Is it kind of Old Republic, or
no?
Is it...
So all we know right now is that it takes place 7 years. Let's see. What'd they say? I think so it takes place 7 years after A New Hope, meaning that it takes place 3 years after Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
So it's kind of in that early restoring the New Republic, kind of thing. Now, we don't know at all, really, if it's about the underworld, if it's about politics, if it's about... Because at that point, there's no resistance yet. It's... The Empire has apparently been pushed out of the galaxy. There's just not really any... This is untapped resource or untapped timeline. So we don't really know. But there hasn't been anything as far as casting announcements, nothing. So we have no idea. Apparently, it's all new characters. That's the only thing we know, is that it's all new characters.
Well, I'm glad. I think they should do, kind of all new characters. We'll get to talk about the old trilogy versus the newer ones and that sort of stuff. But I think they should do all new characters. It's a big universe. There's there's a lot to explore out there. So I think they should.
Yes,
that'll be good. And
then I'm not sure how much you knew about this, but about 7 years ago, and around 2011, 2010, when there was when Celebration 5 happened in Orlando. I don't think you made it to that one, Rains. But there was a series, an animated comedy series, created by the makers of Robot Chicken, Seth Green and Matt Senrich, called Star Wars Detours. Do you remember this at all?
I don't remember Star Wars Detours.
So
where was it? Where could you view it?
Well, that's the thing, is that so they at Celebration, and I remember me and Casey and I think Charles was there, a guy I work with, but they made the announcement there they made the announcement at Celebration 4 in Los Angeles when we were there that Seth Green and those guys were creating a animated series. But it was just announced. At Celebration 5, a couple years later, they actually had footage. So we saw a trailer there of this TV series that George Lucas commissioned them to do. Now, in the George Lucas interview with Jon Stewart, which was the big main event at Celebration, he said that he authorized them to make a canon comedy series. So it centers around the Death Star being built. So it was between episode 3 and 4, and how the Empire was hiding the fact that they were building it by advertising they were building a mall. I'm not kidding about this.
And it was supposed to be canon.
Supposed to be canon now.
But at that time, all the EU was still canon and everything.
Yes,
well,
tentatively,
right?
yes.
Yeah. So this is yeah.
But it was, it was fun. It was a little, they had a couple it was funny because they had a couple stormtroopers as the main characters, and I was thinking like, oh my god, there's 221 and 212 right there on screen. I mean, I'm serious. They're like two stormtroopers.
It was because that was kind of the idea behind our little fan films. These two kind of bumbling stormtroopers.
Yes. And so all the voices. Do you remember? So, Robot Chicken did those Star Wars. So all those guys' voices, they were doing this series. So Seth MacFarlane was the Emperor. You had Breckin Meyer and Donald Faison. They were the Stormtroopers. You had Seth Green obviously do a bunch of... I mean, it was a good-looking series. Now, it was really weird, because at the time, there was only the movies. And you heard about them writing about this live action series that they wanted to do, but they couldn't afford it. So anyway,
so what happened with all this?
Okay, so when Lucasfilm sold to Disney, obviously Disney and Kathleen Kennedy were like, "Well, that everything's canon now. We're not going to do anything with this series." So it got shut. They had 39 episodes finished.
Wow!
They had 60 of them written and in production. So they were ready to roll this thing out. All of a sudden, the buy went through, and then they tabled it. Well, 7 years later, now apparently there's a rumor that they're going to bring it back on the streaming service next fall. Now
obviously, it won't be canon anymore.
It will not be canon. I pretty much guarantee it's not going to be canon. It's going to fall along the lines of these Lego series that they're putting out there, like doing these droid series, the Freemakers. Those aren't canon, but they're nice little fun things. So I guarantee it's going to be in that realm of just fun comedy stuff. So anyway, it is coming. We've talked about it several years ago on this show, but that's I remember me and Casey talked about it a lot because after the buy happened, we were wondering when that thing was gonna, if ever it was ever gonna come out, just as a just like a bonus thing, like, oh look,
that's wild.
But it looks like it's gonna happen, so that's pretty cool.
Okay, that is cool. That is a cool bit of news.
So that's really it. That's all I wanted to kind of touch on. Casey usually runs through all the news. Those are kind of the big stories I saw this past week. There was a quick report I'll bring up about. apparently Tom Kane, who voiced, he's been a guest on our show. He's actually voiced Yoda in the Clone Wars. Did an interview at a Comic-Con recently and said he said he just randomly kind of said that or someone asked him if they were going to do a Yoda movie, and if he had heard if they were going to do a Yoda movie, because would he come back and voice it? And he said, "Wow, not really. I haven't heard." He goes, they've got 9 movies they're working on right now, so I don't think Yoda is one of them. And all of a sudden, people were going crazy, like, "What's 9 movies?" Well, if you count them up, Episode 9 is one of them. The rumored Obi-Wan movie is number 2. The rumored Boba Fett movie is number 3. And then you have Rian Johnson's trilogy. And then you have the trilogy of movies apparently the Game of Thrones creators are commissioned to make. So there you go. There's 9 movies. So everybody kind of knew that. We don't know exactly, though, about the Obi-Wan thing, but that's apparently going to be really announced here shortly.
I feel like it's too many. It's too many.
You feel like it's too many? Okay, well, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
We'll get into that. Okay, well, actually, let's just go ahead and get into it now, because that's all the news I really had. So, well, I'm sure we'll bring that up here in a second, but I wanted to talk to you because we had a pretty lengthy, I feel like, either Twitter or text conversation after The Last Jedi came out. Now, you did a YouTube video on your feelings of that. Which you guys can watch. Where's that at? Is that on your YouTube channel or Facebook? I can't remember.
Well, it's on my YouTube channel, so I had never done a YouTube video before. And I felt passionate enough about doing that video, and I ended up doing like 3 videos or whatever. So yeah, absolutely. People feel free to go check it out and watch it, Hopefully I don't, piss anybody off too bad, but
no, I feel like a lot of people, a lot of fans felt your pain or your feelings about it. So, but before we get into The Last Jedi, let's back up real quick, since we haven't heard you on the show about it. Just summarize your feelings about Force Awakens and Rogue One.
Oh, okay. Well. All right, so I'll try and contain myself so I don't roll off for an hour just talking about these and we got to go. And,
no.
I'll do Rogue One first. First of all, I loved the Dirty Dozen when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a military family. We were moving around all the time. Everyone was in the military, grandparents, uncles, dad, that kind of stuff. So, the Dirty Dozen, I thought was, I must have seen it when I was like 11 or 12 or whatever. And just this really awesome, war movie. And so Rogue One is really kind of patterned off that Dirty Dozen suicide mission, kind of format. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed Rogue One. I thought it was a lot of fun. Obviously there were a lot of nods to the fans, but I still think they did a good enough job of making it its own story, for it to be an enjoyable time at the movies. So, of all the new ones, from the new trilogy, Rogue One, Solo, which I did go see Solo.
Oh,
that's probably been the one I enjoyed the most. I mean, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily the best one or whatever, but it's the one I enjoyed the most. Force Awakens, I went and saw that one in the theater a couple of times, and I went and saw it with a writer buddy of mine out here in California. And then I went and saw it with my nephews in Texas. And it was interesting because, I think I was in some ways I felt that, emotionally, aesthetically, it was definitely that Force Awakens had that kind of Star Wars feel, which was great. My nephews enjoyed it. They had a lot of fun with it. And so, those are some positives there. But, just story wise, I feel like they really bent over backwards to kind of reset the story back to where it was in New Hope, which, to me, just a lot of things just didn't really make sense. I mean, like, how are they still the resistance, when they'd broken the Empire's back? And, how did the First Order, get so much, more power so quickly? How are they able to build this new base? How did they get how did they outnumber the good guys again? Where did Snoke come from? I mean, it just, I felt like if, storytelling kind of works circularly, like you go in circles, like even when you go back to like the ancient myths and that sort of thing, like, storytelling works in circles. It goes in cycles. And so, if you look at where the prequels start, where you have this republic and it's sort of this romantic time. It's, the end of this golden age. There's been this golden age, and then we watch it kind of fall apart. And then you get to the original series, and it's the dark times, right? Like, things are the lowest of the low. And we start to see the rise of something new, with the return of the Jedis and that sort of thing. Well, if we continue that natural cycle, then it would have been more natural to do something along the lines of what the EU did, where you get to see this new Jedi temple, and you get to see the Republic build, and like, what kind of enemies they come up against. Like, I really enjoyed the first several novels of the EU, the Thrawn books, the Jedi, new Jedi temple, all that kind of stuff. I think that was more logical in terms of the story that we were following. And then we get Force Awakens. It just really felt like they were really stretching, that suspension of disbelief to like reset everything to be just like, New Hope, where we're still the plucky rebels, and we're getting our asses kicked, and we need a hero to rise and that kind of stuff. Like, that to me just didn't really, I don't think it really worked for me for me in it from an enjoyment standpoint, but also just logically, storytelling wise, like it felt really forced, to be that way. Mm-hmm. So there, that's the summation without going into too much detail.
Yeah, and I do agree with it definitely being a close to a mirror image of Episode 4. I will say that I do agree with you in a sense that I feel like, at that point it had been 38 years or something like that before since a new hope. So it is a whole new generation that Disney was trying to introduce, basically do what the title said, awaken the Force within a whole nother generation of possible Star Wars fans, right? They weren't doing it for us. They weren't, I don't feel like, they gave us what we wanted in a sense where they didn't make a prequel movie so that, in a sense that it wasn't, even though it was full of visual effects, that it felt smaller back in the small universe as the original trilogy was versus a vast galaxy where we got in the prequels. So they did kind of shrink it back down to a more of an internal conflict with the First Order. And now a lot of the things you're saying about, well, how did we get here? Obviously, there's a 30-year gap between Return of the Jedi. So I get what you're saying as far as what we got in The Force Awakens, but I've always, when you brought up like logical, I always question like, well, what is correct logic? Because anything could have happened in that 30 years. The EU, yes, totally a route or a timeline when Luke got all powerful and developed Jedi and created this new order. But in this timeline, now I know this because I do a lot of reading and a lot of research on it, but he went on to try to learn more before attempting to create a Jedi Order, and it took him about 20 plus years to finally have the confidence and the knowledge to start. And that's when he started training Ben in a group that we learned about in the Last Jedi, really, that what happened, right? So,
well, I think that would have been, and as far as like what is logical, here's both the wonder and curse of storytelling is that when you've got the blank page, anything can happen.
Right.
Literally. I mean, when you've got a blank page in front of you, anything can happen. You can do whatever your imagination gives you, whatever you can create. The minute you write even one word, you start to close in the boxes around what you can do. Because you're creating a world, and every world you create, has rules and has characters, and these characters, you try to make them as lifelike and realistic as possible. And as long as you adhere to the rules that you create, generally your audience will have that suspension of disbelief. Like they'll buy into even the craziest stuff as long as it adheres to this world that you're building. And so that's when you'll see, and I'm trying to think of what maybe is a good example of maybe a film that maybe kind of created that and then broke it. Nothing's jumping right into my mind, although I know that there are several examples out there. I just should have written them down.
No.
But it's like and people can probably remember movies where they've been watching where things are going along, and then all of a sudden, someone just does something out of the blue that well, that doesn't make any sense because what about this and this and this and this? So, that's where the logic, it's an internal logic. It's a created, kind of logic. And I think that's where I struggled with it a little bit because, what we saw at the end of Return of the Jedi is the breaking of the back of the Empire, and not to say that there wouldn't be, and that's why I thought what was so brilliant about those first sequel novels, like with Thrawn and those guys, is like, here's a group of Empire fighters who don't know that they should be defeated, right? And they've got this brilliant guy, and they kind of start out as the underdogs in the first novel, and then by the last one, he's kind of turned the tables on the New Republic or whatever, which I thought was really interesting. But
right.
I still think we could have had, and I talk a little bit about this in one of my YouTube videos, I think we still could have had the same characters, the exact same characters as what we got in Force Awakens. Just, I would have liked to have seen them in sort of this format of, here's Luke starting to train, and I would have liked to have seen the corruption of Ben as a mirror image of the corruption of Anakin. I think that would have been really interesting.
Sure.
And also probably, again, working more in the natural cycle of storytelling. That would have been, I think, more interesting to me. I mean, that's not what we got, but it's always fun to sort of,
and that's the hard part, and that's the hard part for me, and the hard part I had with The Last Jedi, which we'll get into in a second. But I have a hard part. It takes me a little while when I watch a movie, especially a Star Wars movie, when I want to see certain things and I don't see them, it's I got to make sure I do my best to separate. Okay, what the creator wanted to tell and versus what I wanted to see and read or witness. Right. So once I get over that, then I try to really put my mind and feet into the shoes of the creator and think, okay, well, why did he do these things? Why did he choose these things? And And in the end, it's what they wanted. Just like if we talked about last week, me and Casey. I mean, we've been filmmakers before and stuff like that, and it's like, there's definitely stories that I like to tell, but obviously a lot of people might not agree with that story. So it's still my story. So.
And you're not going to please all people at all
definitely
times.
Not.
That's impossible. And one thing, one gripe I think people had with my YouTube videos, which were really about, some story mechanics kind of stuff, is that, you can't tell people what they enjoy or don't enjoy. That is completely, subjective. So
correct.
For anyone out there who enjoyed the hell out of Force Awakens, I can certainly probably make a great argument that they maybe made some storytelling mistakes compared to like what, the natural cycle of storytelling would look like. I could probably, write a paper about that or something like that. But that doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it or didn't enjoy it or didn't think it was awesome. You can't tell people what they can or can't enjoy. So, I hope a lot of people enjoyed Force Awakens. I mean, it sure made a ton of money. So I'm assuming a ton of people did.
Yeah, well, a ton of people. Yeah, the only way you make that kind of money is people going back and back and back and watching repeat viewings of it, right? So I definitely think that just that last point on that is like I was talking about with the whole next generation of fans to see it, because you brought up, you said, when we're in the Force Awakens, it's like, where did the First Order come from, and where does Snoke come from? Why is there resistance? And and if you think about it, though, I mean, you could have had those same. You obviously had those same questions when the original movie came out, because you didn't know who Darth Vader was. You didn't know where the Empire came from. We got thrown in this civil war even more so than we are in the Force Awakens, because in the Force Awakens, they don't even the New Republic doesn't even know about the First Order really. They just discover the First Order like a couple years before this movie, and they've been
and that's what kind of boggled my mind a little bit. Is like, you would assume, and this is where like when you're at the blank page, anything can happen. Like it's easier actually at the beginning because people will buy whatever rules you put into this universe you're creating. I do think they did a great job and I know we're going to talk about the original trilogy here in a minute, but in the original trilogy, such a great job with the opening crawl and sort of establishing like, okay, and it's really the opening crawl is the first rules of the Star Wars universe, right?
Absolutely.
Like here it is.
It's
like
the setup, yeah.
Yeah, we're laying this out here. There's this empire, and you learn very quickly after the opening crawl when you get some dialogue where the emperor has just dissolved the Senate. Mm-hmm. So there's no longer a Senate. So like any facade of democracy has just been wiped away, and like that's
not in the crawl. That's in the movie.
No. After the crawl,
right?
Like
right.
You have the crawl. You set up. There's this empire. There's these rebels, and then later after the crawl, the emperor has dissolved the Senate.
Correct.
The regional governors are in full control. So you're realizing like, okay, here's why these guys are bad. Like they're wiping away democracy. There's a group of people fighting still for democracy, and they're reaching out for this hope, from this older generation, this disappeared group of warriors who used to defend the Republic, the democratic galaxy, if you will. And so it's like, oh, okay, I get that. And, but then now we've made a lot of rules because we had 3 movies, right? So we like meet these characters and things happen and we sort of, build these kind of structures or whatnot. I was sort of like, what was the Republic doing for 30-something years, like, to be able to so quickly have to be the Resistance again? Like, they weren't building up power. They didn't did they stop like having armies or, I mean,
well,
it just seemed like,
they didn't.
How did they get there?
Yeah, they didn't. And they were rebuilding there's a lot of, for years they were still kind of fighting minor remnants of the Empire that were, because the hardest part, even for me sometimes, is to wrap your head around the size of this galaxy, right? I mean, when things happen, it's almost rumor on the outer planets because they don't ever get the news and they don't ever really find out what's happening. I mean, things get to them in such a long period of time. When the Empire wiped out the Jedi in Episode 3, there were still a lot of people that didn't even know about the Jedi, didn't even ever experience the Jedi because there's only so many thousand Jedi, and they were keepers of the peace. So if planets were peaceful or if they need anything, they never saw Jedi. So in that whole 19 years of Vader from 3 to 4, there were so many people, and there's books that have come out, which is really cool, and comics. There's so many people in the galaxy that they just hear about this guy. They never see him. They don't know if it's real, So, in Rogue One, clearly, when he shows up on that ship, like, those guys have no idea who he is. I mean, they're like, what the hell is going on with this guy? On Hoth, there's a book called Twilight Battlefront, based on the first game that came out a few years ago. It's called Twilight Company. It follows this group of rebels throughout the Civil War. And on Hoth, when, in the movie, when Vader invades Hoth, there's excerpts in there of this band that encountered him in the hallway where they don't understand how he's deflecting their laser bolts. I mean, he's like, who is this guy? What the heck is this guy doing? I mean, it's crazy to think that with the vastness of the galaxy, information and what things people believe or not, it's so hard to understand, I guess, in a sense. So, for example, like when we this 30-year gap between 6 and 7, it's like, so to summarize it, the First Order, so a year after Return of the Jedi is the big battle of Jakku, which technically ended the Civil War. The Civil War didn't end in Return of the Jedi; it ended a year later on Jakku. That's why there's that whole graveyard of ships,
right?
But the remnants, they signed a treaty saying that they're done, and they got to, the remnants left to the unknown regions, and that's where Admiral Sloan took the remnants out there and started building the First Order. And now there's still a mystery where Snoke came from. No one knows that yet. But
maybe it doesn't matter.
I think it'll come up. I think eventually it will come up. There's a great book called Bloodline that's about Leia. It's about 7 years before The Force Awakens. And it's in that book that it is discovered, the First Order is basically discovered. There's a big, massive funding happening with these gangs. They encounter the First Order for the first time. The name is brought up the first time. So Leia is trying to convince the Republic that there's a major threat, and they don't believe her. They don't think that they're a threat. It's it's like, oh, it's the remnants of the Empire. It's fine. If they ever do anything, we'll stop them. So she leaves the Senate and forms a resistance to combat the First Order and find them. And it takes them 7 years until The Force Awakens comes when they attack or whatever. So anyway, that's the brief backstory that I obviously learned after the movie, but because I had the same questions as you did when I saw the movie. Like, well, how did this happen in 30 years? Or
yeah, again, to me, it's a stretch. It's a big stretch. Like, and it's also, to me, it's just less interesting to do the same thing again.
Yeah,
to me, that's right. It's just,
yeah, I agree.
It's less interesting.
I wasn't blown away by The Force Awakens. It's a fun movie. I was more interested in seeing Han, Chewie, and Leia than I were any of these new characters, because I'm obviously old school. But I totally understand what Disney was doing, and I totally understand why it was called The Force Awakens, because it wasn't in the movie. It was actually, I think, representing the entire Star Wars, medium, that they're reawakening everything from now on, as opposed to what George was doing.
Well, and you would think that with the first two that they were even if you disagreed, you would think, well, maybe they're doing a great job, because the returns were massive, especially for Force Awakens. But now, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
But I agree with you that I love Rogue One. I relate more to, it's weird. I like comedies, but I relate more to darker films and films that have a lot more emotion in them. And Rogue One was fantastic. I felt everything that was going on in that movie, and I love how much it played into, it set up Episode 4 so well, I thought, and we got that small paragraph in the crawl, like you mentioned, and the movie is basically that paragraph. And just, I think Jyn Erso was a great character. I think what she did and how she did it was great. But anyway, I loved it. So Last Jedi, this is what your YouTube video is about.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, I know that there's people who love it and people who hate it, and for all kinds of reasons or whatever. I mean, for me, I could not get over, and I won't expound too much on it. I found the writing to be really, really poor. It took me out of the experience, from the beginning. I think, if I were to bottle it down and say that there were, three things that, that maybe just sort of, killed that film for me is that, the first one is that they didn't take, there were a lot of characters in there they just didn't take seriously. And I mean, when you take a character seriously, that doesn't mean that there can't be humor or anything like that. That's not really, but like a lot of they turned a lot of the villains and a lot of characters, into more like, kind of like cartoon characters. They just, they weren't serious characters, especially the villains, just were cartoon characters. That took me out of it, right away.
And they did it right at the beginning, which was
right at the beginning, which really took me out.
I agree.
It was a jolt. It was a bit of a jolt. And so then my analytical brain kicked in, and that's when probably the whole thing was, kind of ruined for me. but and then, just the plot contrivances were just, I just couldn't deal with it. And to give one example, like when you have, the little side quest at Canto Bright or whatever, and they roll in and they see this, hacker or whatever that they're gonna get, and they don't get him, and they get arrested, and then they get thrown in jail. They just happen to get thrown into a cell with another hacker who can do the same thing, who ends up being the one to betray them. And
yes,
it's like, oh my God, really? Like that has got to be the laziest writing that I just couldn't get past it, And then last thing, our main characters, almost zero arc, from our main characters. Poe gets, he gets a little bit of movement there, but almost zero growth or change in any of our characters. Where they are at the beginning of the movie is who they are at the end of the movie, with maybe a slight exception of Poe, and that one's, thin. So those things, I just, it has zero to do with, who the characters are and who the actors are. I really do feel we could have had the same characters and had a great new trilogy, to be honest with you. I just can't, my mind can't wrap around, the directions they decided to take the story in. And I just thought the writing was really bad. So that's where I land on Last Jedi. I mean, there were some good things about it. I mean, it looked great. I think the actors all, acted really well. I thought Mark Hamill acted really, really well. I really like Daisy Ridley. I really like Adam Driver. I mean, I think those things, were at a high quality. It's just the story itself, just kind of ruined it for me.
Well, I will, before I mention my thoughts against yours, but I do want to mention to everybody. I know we're already deep into the show, but like, we're kind of hitting on this month. Casey and I last week started talking about a lot of the fan hate that kind of came about this movie, the Last Jedi. It's been unbelievable, the attack that some of these fans have done on Rian Johnson and Kelly Marie Tran, and it's unfortunate, but I feel like at least what I'm seeing on social media the past week, it's a lot of people kind of rallied and really started talking positively about the fandom, and trying to kind of push these people aside and report these people, and let's get back to having. And that's what I feel like. I want to preface, when I asked Raney to be on the show, I said, I want to talk about some brief things, but then I want to talk about what we love about Star Wars, and mainly the original trilogy. Well, we may get to that, but honestly, if we don't, I just want to make people understand this is the type of conversation you should have about. Yeah. Movies.
Oh my God. Yeah.
We're not yelling at each other saying like, well, how can you hate this? And how can you get, it's like that's where you cross the line. And look, I totally get your views because you're very good at what you do and I'm not. And I love a lot about Star Wars, but there's definitely things I don't like about it. For example, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, like you just said, I agree. I think I was taken out of it with the comedy part of it because that's not how this was set up in The Force Awakens. I was the first viewing. I walked out of that. I remember walking out of The Last Jedi, and I said it on this show. Like I was disappointed. I was highly disappointed.
Oh, I was too. Very disappointed.
But I had tickets to the next day, so I knew I had to give this another shot. Now.
Oh, you'd already bought the tickets for the 2 days?
Oh, so we go on the December movies. We go to the opening night on ourselves, like all of us, as far as all of our fans here that we know. And then Friday actually is a employee day where the company buys the theater out. So I saw Friday with all my coworkers, guys that work for me, and it's like 25 of us in a big theater, So I was really able to focus, sit down and really focus on the movie. And to be honest, the movie was better, but it still wasn't, great. And after I've seen it a couple times at home now, I've got I got some appreciation for it, some I don't. But the bottom line is, like you, I think that all that Canto Bind stuff was pointless.
It was.
I think
it's hard to argue that it wasn't pointless.
I know, and like I mentioned to Casey several times, and hopefully you agree with this, but to me, what would have made it better is how they got there is fine. How they ended up on Snoke's ship, as in Finn and Rey, or Finn and Rose, that's fine and good. But they still didn't do anything when they were there. So if they somehow ran across Rey and had to save her, then it would have made sense to me how they got there and why they got there. But the fact that they get there and nothing happens, and then they somehow get off and land on Crate, it was like, well, what's the point? Because they ended up back exactly where they were without any progress.
Yeah.
And then the whole space chase in general didn't do anything for me. I mean.
It's a slow motion chase through space. I mean, it's really bad.
Because if you think about it, with all the Star Destroyers that were there, and I didn't. This is something I actually haven't mentioned on the show, but all the Star Destroyers that are there, there's probably a dozen of them, plus Supreme Leader's Snoke's ship. If you think about it, you got hundreds of TIE fighters on each one of them. Hundreds.
Oh yeah,
and they all apparently can get there and attack. Because Kylo Ren just went there and destroyed all their X-Wings.
And they apparently have loads of fuel. So why not just,
why not send 1,000 TIE fighters at the ship, go through the shields, and just blast the engines, and that thing won't stop, catch up with the Star Destroyers. It's like, I get it. There's logic there that doesn't make sense.
It's rough.
But I do agree. I do like I've come to appreciate, I think, actually what he did with Rey and Luke. I do like those scenes. You know, there's a point I mentioned to, I don't know if you know this, Rains, but there's a point in the novelization of The Last Jedi, because I listened to the audiobook for that. There's a point in the novelization which I wish they would have kept in the movie. But when you know, the point where Rey, you know, does her thing where she dives into the island and does her thing, and then she's talking to Kylo and they touch and all that, you know, and you remember that point where Luke walks in? Yeah. Okay, so in the novel, there's a scene right before that where Luke is actually contemplating out on the island somewhere, looking out over the sea. He's contemplating, like, what do I need? What do I have to do? What do I need to do? Well, he then decides, right then, he says, you know what? My sister needs me. I'm going to go and I'm going to help them destroy the First Order. That's what he's thinking when he walks into that hut and sees them. Now, you wouldn't know that from the movie, but he is ready. He has turned that point, and that's the part where I never understood why that didn't happen. Why did he never decide, or it never hit him that, okay, I need to go and help my sister because she is dying. People are dying. And a Jedi, no matter what, would have kind of done that. And anyway.
Well, and that's, I agree. I think it's a bummer that that's not in there because, you know, and I think we could do a whole podcast on, you know, was Luke's character consistent with who we learned he was in 3 movies before? But I'll just comment on this as far as the Rey and Luke thing. I think this is where there was really a problem with Rey's character starting in Force Awakens, and I think, you know, it just kind of depends. I don't know what J.J. Abrams' plan was versus, you know, what Rian Johnson did, or, you know, if they had much communication. I don't know what the master plan was, or if it was changed or whatever. But, you know, part of the problem is that in the first one, so like Rey, you know, doesn't know she can use the Force, doesn't really know about the Force, you know, oblivious to it all. And then even really upon introduction to the idea of the Force, or the idea that she can use it, is very quickly very powerful. Like, I mean, you know, she defeats Kylo Ren. Granted, Kylo, you know, was injured and had just killed his dad or whatever. But I mean, she'd never picked up a lightsaber before that day or whatever, right? So, you know, they put her in this position where she, you know, storytelling wise, narratively, she's already defeated, you know, who is ostensibly at least the second most powerful being that we've seen that point in the movie. Like, we haven't seen Luke again. You know, we know that there is a Snoke out there, but Kylo is the baddest ass of all the baddest asses, and she beats him. You know, so you've made a challenge for yourself there, because, you know, part of what makes a character interesting is being afraid for that character. You know, is having that character up against a challenge that is greater than where they currently are. Right. So you want to see that character like have to develop. You know, so she shows up there with Luke, and really it's hard to quantify what she really learned from him. Like, it's a lot of her trying to convince him to come back and teach me. But
she didn't learn anything.
She didn't learn anything. It's very vague. It's sort of like reach out and touch the Force. Well, she clearly has already done that.
Yeah.
Because she kicked the shit out of Kylo Ren. And so it's very frustrating with her in that she doesn't grow, really. But she doesn't have to grow because she's already, you know, kind of done this thing. Now, what I think they could have done, you know, what I think would have been perhaps interesting is like, if there's this exploration of like why she is so powerful. And I think it would have been very interesting if maybe she'd been able to defeat Kylo because she tapped into the dark side, and, like, you know, subconsciously somehow was very linked to the dark side. And like, you find Luke having to confront that in another student, you know, and then have Luke having to decide, you know, maybe he should kill her, like he had, you know, and again, we can talk about Luke's character or whatever, like he'd been tempted to do with Ben. to have him confront that again and to have her have to conquer this dark side within herself, that could have been very interesting. That's challenge. That's, then our fear becomes not that she can't beat Kylo Ren because she's already beaten him, but can she defeat the dark side in herself? But we're given, there's none of that. There's no, like really honestly, nothing really happens. Well, again, nothing really happens, and I guess to touch on what you said earlier, Dave, and because I want to agree with you, like, I think part of what happened was people walked out of the theater really disappointed, like you and I did, and they got mad, and they had a hard time verbalizing what made them upset about the movie. You and I can talk about, these are the things that bothered me, and it's very, I think kind of rational, and maybe people will disagree, but it's you can kind of talk about it as concrete. Other people just got mad, and when they get mad, they lash out, and it just doesn't do us any good to do that. I mean, you don't prove your point. You don't make yourself look, any smarter, or it's just getting control of those emotions, and really kind of asking yourself, like, well, why didn't I like that movie? And then sort of figuring it out. And having rational conversations. There's, it just doesn't help anybody to just haul off and say, Rian Johnson's stupid, or or whatever. It just doesn't advance the conversation at all. And so I mean, that is what it is. But
well, I did want to ask you because I think you kind of add a unique perspective to this, but talk about Rian Johnson's situation, because as a writer, I mean, think about the trilogy of books you did. If someone had written the first book, how much does that affect the middle book that you're writing?
Well, I mean, the middle book is the hardest book because you're not really allowed to reach a conclusion,
right?
You're doing a lot of setup, but also you're trying to advance the characters, and you're really trying to heighten the tension and increase the stakes. That's what you're trying to do in that middle book. And yet somehow you still have to do that and give that middle chapter a beginning, middle, and end. It has to also have those things. Super hard to do. And listen, Rian Johnson did Looper. I loved Looper.
I did too.
I don't know if you and I talked about it before Last Jedi came out, but and maybe this is part of the reason why I was so disappointed. I thought Rian Johnson, having seen Looper, I thought this guy was going to kill it.
Yeah,
I was like, too. This guy's going to knock it out of the park. And then the reviews came out, and the reviews were like, I mean, calling this thing a masterpiece. And that's, I think that's also partly what's caused people to get so frustrated.
Well, and the trailers looked great. I mean,
the trailers looked good. I will be honest with you. I was nervous with the trailers, but I thought they were trying to hide a lot.
Oh yeah.
And so I wasn't, maybe I didn't let myself get that nervous, but I was like, when I saw the trailers, nothing in there like made me super excited. But I was like, okay, they're probably hiding the best footage or whatever. And then of course all the reviews came out. It was like 90-something% on the Rotten Tomatoes or whatever. And I think that's what also got people frustrated. And I am perplexed. I'm absolutely perplexed by why the critics love Last Jedi so much. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. I think if that number of plot contrivances was written into any other movie, I'm sure it would have gotten trashed. But and I think that makes people frustrated when they're like, no, I don't think this movie's well written, and the critics are saying one thing, and then then of course they're having this big argument, and a lot of people who critique the movie are kind of lumped in with the super angry, like, well, you just hate, the newness. Like, no, I don't hate the newness. Like, have new characters. I want new characters, it's great, but just do it well.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think Ryan. I mean, I think people were frustrated that Ryan, that they felt like you were talking about. They felt like after watching The Force Awakens, there was a way that these characters were going, and then Ryan, wrote it a way that he wanted it to go, and it wasn't what a lot of fans wanted. So that's where a lot of the backlash came in. Well, this is not what Luke should have done, or this is not what and
Ray. I don't think it's the way J.J. Abrams would have done it. I got to be honest with you. I don't know what went on behind the scenes. I wasn't there, or whatever. But I feel like J.J. Abrams is almost in an impossible place right now. I mean, what is supposed to happen in Episode 9? Like, I mean, a lot of times you get to a third, chapter, and you do sort of realize, like, for instance, at the end of Empire Strikes Back, when you get into Return of the Jedi, some things have to happen. Like, Han is a prisoner. Luke has been defeated. He left his training early. Yeah. Like, how's he going to get powerful enough to beat Vader? How are they going to rescue Han? How can, it seems like the Empire is so powerful at the end of, we know that the Emperor is out there. What's going to happen with him? Like, there's these things where you're like, there's this anticipation for what needs to be resolved in this third film. I don't really know what we're supposed to be like anticipating here. Luke's dead, Snoke's dead, Kylo's out there, but we already know Rey can beat Kylo. Like, what's supposed to happen? Like, I don't know what J.J. Abrams is going to do to make a satisfying film. I feel like I'm afraid that people are going to blame him when really I think it's just been kind of a misguided effort from the beginning. And part of that's his fault because I think he made some weird choices for Force Awakens, but I think it's been exacerbated by Last Jedi. I don't know what he's going to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I definitely think that the one thing that has to happen, as opposed to what I've always said, I feel like that should have happened with The Last Jedi, was there needs to be a time gap. I felt like what suffered with The Last Jedi, partially on the story wise, was I think it was, it was a connected sequel basically, and these Star Wars movies, like you said, they have their own beginning, middle, and end, even though it's part of a trilogy. But I feel like you have to have some time in order to, because the crawl for Last Jedi was basically a summary of what happened in The Force Awakens. There was no catch up point, how long it's been, because you didn't let these characters kind of settle and then find that new story. Because if you really think about it, I mean, this is one movie. It was one big movie. When you open with The Force Awakens and you're talking about Luke has vanished and the Resistance is fighting and all this stuff, well, it takes all the way till the end of The Last Jedi to figure out, okay, this is what happens to Luke after they found him, and this is where we are.
And what was so weird was, like, imagine watching that as one film and then experiencing that tonal shift,
yeah.
And that's, again, what we were talking about earlier. Like, when you've got the blank page, you can do anything. But they weren't really at a blank page because we'd already, written a whole movie in this new trilogy. They changed Luke's wardrobe from the end of, Force Awakens to the beginning of Last Jedi, even though it was supposed to be the same scene, right? Like, he's in this kind of white robe, so you're almost sort of expecting a Gandalf the White-esque kind of character, right? Like, he's made this sort of ascension, right?
Yeah.
But then at the start of Last Jedi, he's actually in these very gray, drab robes, right? And here's this guy who's kind of given up. And so it's like, it makes me think like that they were not on the same page about how one movie was supposed to end and the next one was supposed to begin. Like, and J.J. Abrams was involved in this one, but almost kind of like Lost, where they started this thing, but they didn't really know how it was going to end. They're just sort of like, well, we'll figure it out as we go.
I'm pretty sure they have an ending. I'm with you. I don't know what it is right now,
or how we're supposed to be excited about it. I mean,
so talk to me about Solo, though.
I will say this. I don't think Solo commits any grave like storytelling sins or whatever. It's just, I think there's a couple things. One is it's sort of like, did we really need to know, where Han Solo came from? I mean, he's such an iconic character, but they didn't add anything to his myth,
Mm-hmm.
in this film, in my opinion. I mean, like, we don't really learn anything about him that we didn't necessarily already, know from, what his character was. And also, I feel bad for the actor, Alden Ehrenreich. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name properly.
Alden Reich.
Or
Alden Ehrenreich.
Got it. I mean, you're trying to play Harrison Ford's maybe, besides Indiana Jones, like his
most iconic character. Yeah.
His most iconic character. It's like, man, you're kind of asking the poor guy to do the impossible, and I do think, Donald Glover probably did the best job of everybody.
Mm.
But it was a little boring, and it did kind of suffer from sort of like a purposelessness, and that's why I'm a little bit of afraid, like, of them having 9 movies, and they want to do a Boba Fett movie, and they want to do an Obi-Wan movie, and it's like, you know what? Maybe it's best to kind of leave these characters as we know them now and do new stuff, do new, different characters, because I think what they've tried to do with nostalgia is starting to wear thin. And they're starting to see diminishing returns. I will be very curious to see what happens with the box office of Episode 9. I will tell you this. It would not shock me if it made sub $1 billion. It would not shock me at all. I mean, we'll see.
Yeah,
but
I think that one will be. I think
me.
that'll be a. I think it'll be a big bounce back. I think because
and you might be right.
JJ.
I
think because it's
JJ.
JJ. I think it's because it's JJ. If Ryan Johnson was doing it, it wouldn't get near anything. But I think with the conclusion, I think the way he hypes his movies, the marketing of his type of movies is well done, and I think. Will it make? It definitely won't make what Force Awakens did. Will it do more than Last Jedi? I probably feel like it'll do about the same. So, but again, we haven't seen any of it, and Billy.
We don't know.
Hey, adding Billy D. Williams
it does
is a
have
big
Billy
thing.
D. If it's got Billy D, maybe I'll go back for a couple of viewings of Billy D. But it's in a tough spot because normally I would say, like, well, if it gets great reviews, the Rotten Tomatoes effect, like, more people will go see it. But a lot of fans felt burned by the reviews of both Force Awakens and especially from Last Jedi, right? Like, both of those are like 90-something Rotten Tomatoes. And so now, will they believe if it gets a great score? And then conversely, if it gets a bad score, which I think is very possible because, again, storytelling wise, it's in a really bad place. Like, I feel like they're starting at a handicap. If it gets bad reviews, that's definitely not going to help. I think it's in a tough spot. We will see what happens.
I just wish people would learn to go make their own judgments, because there's a lot of people out there that still read reviews and don't see stuff based on what other people think.
Well, I think it's fair only in this, and that it's not cheap to go to the movies. Granted,
Sure.
There's Movie Pass now, so if you've got X number of dollars for a movie budget, and there's like 20 big popcorn movies that are going to come out this year, maybe you can only afford to go see 3 of them.
Totally agree.
I get it. I get it.
And I think that's what
I
think a lot of what happened to Solo is that reason, because you had Avengers still making money. You had Deadpool 2 out there that's making money. I mean, you have that's three blockbusters in 1 month.
Yeah.
I mean, that is hard to do.
And they made huge money. And with more to come.
Totally.
There was a Jurassic Park movie around the corner.
Exactly.
Incredibles has made a ton of money.
Incredibles, yeah.
And I will say this. The way I felt in Avengers Infinity War was the way I wanted to feel in Last Jedi.
Yeah.
That was how I wanted to feel. Because, man, did you see that one? Did you see Infinity War?
I did. But that's to me that's such a hard comparison because you had 18 movies leading up to that movie. So
yeah,
I get there's the hype for that movie, and I get the unbelievable assembly of characters and all that stuff. And yes, it was a good, but I still had a lot of issues with that movie. Seeing them all together still. The one thing that saved it for me, to be honest, the one thing that saved me for Infinity War was the fact that it was mainly about Thanos.
Well, and that was what was so brilliant is that the way they structured the story.
Yes,
I mean
that was the only thing to me that saved that movie.
There were probably a million things that could have gone wrong.
Yes,
but so much went right because the writers were smart. They structured it well. The theme was consistent from beginning to end. Brilliant theme, actually. I mean, the theme is actually pretty genius. And I mean, it was just a great cosmic popcorn adventure, and I loved it. And I guess maybe that's a good segue to, what did I love about the original trilogy so much? I mean, I didn't know anything about writing when I watched the original trilogy. I didn't know anything about really movies or anything like that. But the original movies. They were about escape. And, I was going through some hard things when I was, I lost my dad when I was young. And to see this hero who, didn't know who his dad was, and, who, there was all this darkness out there and to see him kind of learn and grow and overcome his own weaknesses and overcome, the darkness, that was inspiring, but it was exciting and it was fun. Right. And it was beyond, regular life. And, I think there's some of that in these, and I want to be careful, with how I say this, but I do think in some ways, whether it comes from the fandom or whether it comes from, inside Lucasfilm or whatever, there was unfortunately like a politicization of Star Wars in some ways. And I think again, some of that's probably fandom's fault and some of that comes from, within Lucasfilm. And I think whenever that happens, it takes away from a little bit of the escapism, like you can feel the puppeteers behind the show when they're not supposed to be there, and you can kind of feel them, and that takes away from a little bit of the escape. But as far as what I loved, I mean, it was just pure escapist entertainment, and I related to the main character, so those were the things that I loved about the original trilogy.
Mm-hmm. And I love and I agree with you, and I love the one thing I wholeheartedly love about the original trilogy is, and honestly, the one thing I probably love most about Star Wars in general is, not surprising in what we call the show, is the Force. And in the original trilogy, it was such a mystery of what that was and how that you can use it. And there's people out there that can tap into it, and there was a whole religion of warriors that fought with the Force. It was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome, and we never saw it.
World building. Yeah,
we never saw it, and you talked about the Clone Wars, and you just had this vision of what it looked like, and with these Jedis leading these armies, and it's like, and the fact that he learns it, and there's a dark warrior that tapped into the dark side of this thing, and it's like, that's where I'm, and I've never said this on the show, and I was going to talk about it when Casey's back on here, but like to me, what I want more out of Star Wars is I want the Force more.
Yeah.
And I feel like with the new trilogy, we're back where we were in the original, like you said, where, you know, we're only getting glimpses of that. We're only getting pieces of that. We're not getting the full measure of what it is and what it means. And to be honest, like I enjoyed the prequels, and mainly because we had all these Jedi around. I mean, how freaking cool is that to see all these Jedi being keepers of the peace and trying to instill good and keep order in the galaxy. I mean, I want more stories from that era, you know, of Jedi. Because I just that whole mystery of the Force is still what I love about Star Wars, and especially the original trilogy.
My favorite scene in all of Star Wars is Empire Strikes Back, when, you know, Luke's ship sinks into the swamp on Dagobah, and he comes out, and Yoda says, try to lift it out, and he's like, it's too big. You know, he tries to lift it, and then Yoda has that monologue about what the Force is.
That is why Yoda is my favorite character.
Yoda lifts it out. But, you know, it's not just the lifting of the ship. You know, that's the big special effect. That's the action, you know, that kind of thing. But you think about all the things that you get in that one scene. You get world building because you learn more about the Force. You get this character development with Luke because you see what part of Luke's flaw is.
Yes.
He is those things that Yoda says about him. Like he's not patient. You know, he's always thinking about tomorrow. Like, and then it's always, oh, we'll never get it out. You know, it always can't. You don't really believe. And so it's like, that's the thing that Luke has to overcome. And that's what makes his fight with Vader scary, is that as an audience, he again is reckless when he leaves, because you can tell like he still hasn't learned his lesson.
Yes.
And he loses and gets his arm cut off. Like damn, you know, that.
Yeah.
You know, with Rey, you know, we never get that kind of moment with her where we realize, like, here's what Rey is struggling with. You know, here's what's blocking her from reaching her full potential. And then we get this sort of, you know, we don't get that beautiful moment of world building, or, you know, that sort of moment just doesn't get, you know, really replicated for this character, unfortunately. But that's my favorite scene all time in all of Star Wars.
And the other part of that scene too is that it showed for the first time with that movie, with that it didn't matter what you looked like, it didn't matter what size you were.
Yep.
That you could use the Force and do amazing things. And
it's not this, you know, what Yoda says, it's not this crude matter.
Yes.
You know, luminous beings are we, you know.
Correct.
And that's why and I've told you this before, I know we've talked about this before, I do think the biggest mistake, if I can say this about George Lucas, because he gave me Star Wars and Indiana Jones, so, you know.
Yeah.
But the biggest mistake that Lucas made wasn't Jar Jar Binks. The biggest mistake he made was the midichlorians, I thought. Because it makes the magic of the Force less magical. Like, oh, well, you know, you've got midichlorians and, you know, that's how it works. Like, okay, well, how boring is that? Like, you know, I agree with you. I wanted to see more Force, and I wanted it to be mysterious, you know, and magical, and I thought that was, you know, probably the biggest mistake of the prequels was the whole, you know, midichlorian kind of thing,
right?
You know, but
yeah,
what are you going to do?
Yeah, you're going to accept it and have to kind of live with it. But you know,
because that's it.
That's it. You know, but you know, that is the only time it's really mentioned ever. So, although in the Last Jedi novelization, again, when Leia gets sucked out of the bridge and she's kind of tapping into the Force, there she does have there is a mention of her connecting with microscopic, organisms, and it's partially what kind of propels her. It's not actually, so there's a little bit of mention, and it doesn't mention midichlorians, but it mentions kind of these organisms that are helping her tap into it at that point. So there was a little bit of that, but other than that, I haven't read or heard anything else, any mention of midichlorians. So
yeah.
Again, it's one of them things where the Jedi know it then in that era, but it's something that's not passed on. So like Luke has no idea about midichlorians, and maybe later he does, but during the original trilogy,
maybe
no
when he gets all those texts or whatever.
Yeah, maybe he learns it, but yeah. So by far that's what I love the most about by far that's what I love most about Star Wars, and that's why Yoda is my favorite character by far. So,
oh yeah, man.
Well, Rains,
I know we've gone over our time limit.
No, that's fine. Because I was about to mention that I just need to get you back on the show more.
I need to come back and talk. Hopefully, the audience doesn't loathe my presence on the show or anything like that. I mean,
no, again, this is healthy Star Wars discussions. Debates. It's just clearly illustrating that you can have strong opinions about movies and not, get all. Bring up whatever hatred and racism and sexism and all this stuff that's happening.
At the end of the day, they are just movies.
Exactly.
There is other stuff.
It's all fake. It's all not real.
Not real. It is not real.
It is. But it's it's a
storytelling is it's a huge part of our lives.
It is,
and so I don't want to say that and say that stories are not important. I think stories are. I mean, I wouldn't do what I mean. It is my life and my ambition to tell stories. I mean, stories are hugely important to humans and to human psychology and that kind of thing, but only because they reflect the story of real life, and they help us with real life. That's what makes them important, is their impact on real life. Mm-hmm. In and of themselves, they're stories. So
try,
we can all chill out.
Try to enjoy them, and if you don't, just move on and try to enjoy the next story.
Yeah, enjoy something different. Find a story that you do enjoy.
Exactly. So, I'm gonna, like I said, Rains, I'm gonna look back and make sure you haven't been on a previous episode, because I thought you might have, but maybe not. If not, this is your first, and we will get you on again for sure, because there's a lot more Star Wars discussion going on. As obviously we roll into new animated series, new streaming service that's going to have a live action series, episode 9, some movies that are going to get announced, blah blah blah. There's all kinds of stuff to talk about. So,
well, how about if we do this, Twin, to put something down to force us to do a future podcast together. Why don't we do this?
Yeah,
we'll make a bet. Over under $1 billion for episode 9.
Oh, okay.
I'll take the under, clearly. It sounds like you're taking the over.
I'm definitely taking the over then for that.
The winner will make the other dinner, and we will eat the dinner while doing a podcast.
Oh. But I can't wait. We can't wait till December of 2019 to have you back on.
We can do another one. I'm just saying that's the bet.
Okay, fine.
And that's what we'll do. So I'll have to come back for that one.
Wait a minute. So you mean I would, like, if I lose, I would make dinner and send it to you, and then we?
No. I'll show up.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay. You're on. That's good.
Yeah,
okay, I like that.
I'll show up.
Wow. Okay. So
I'm saying under $1 billion.
Yes, under $1 billion.
Although, let's see. So when is it coming out? It's coming out at the end of next year.
Why don't we say because it comes out 2019, December 2019.
I don't think inflation should be that bad by then.
Well, if you want, why don't we say over under The Last Jedi, which I think was
all right. Let's do it that way. We'll do over under Last Jedi.
I think it was 1.3 billion worldwide.
Yes.
So I think it's still going to be over that. So you think it's going to be definitely
I don't
under?
Think so.
Okay.
I'm still. If it was today's dollars, like if it came out tomorrow, I would say it would do under $1 billion. That's what I would say. But we'll do unadjusted with Last Jedi.
Yes.
Over under 1.3.
Just whatever the box office is, 1.3. Yeah, I think it's going to. I think it's going to be over.
That's fair.
I think it's going to be over. Yeah,
I'm taking under. Maybe significantly under.
Wow. Well, it doesn't matter. If it's under, it's under. All right, brother. We hope you guys enjoyed. Follow Raney. Just let everybody know where they can reach you and what they can read from you, man, if they're interested.
If you just Google me, James Raney or James Matlack Raney, you'll find me. So you can Google that. My videos will show up. My books will show up. All that stuff.
Yeah, great stuff there. Like I said, Raney's a big time friend of mine. It's been telling stories ever since I've known him. So go check him out. Of course, we're at InsideTheForce.com on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and you can go to our website and subscribe to all of our shows on any platform you can find us on. The RSS feed is there. I'm for those of you, I haven't mentioned too much on here, but I mentioned it a couple times, but I want to talk about it more. If you guys are out there that are into tabletop games and are playing Star Wars Destiny, there's a podcast that I help produce called The Jedi Trials. They talk nothing but this Star Wars Destiny game. It's popular. It's crazy right now. Popular. But hosted by D-House and Mike the Rebel Spy. Go listen to that. They've got a great thing going there. They've got a Patreon account that people are signing up for. They just launched a YouTube channel that they're adding some video on there. So if you guys are playing that game, go listen and watch those guys. So thejeditrials.com. You can go get that show right there. So Casey will be back with me next week. Guys, have a great rest of the week. Rains, thanks for coming on again.
Thanks for having me, brother.
I appreciate it. Thanks for listening, everybody. May the Force be with you.
Thank you for listening to Inside the Force, a Star Wars podcast hosted by David Cottingham and Casey Cooney. For more shows, additional content, articles, and the latest Star Wars news, please visit InsideTheForce.com. Inside the Force. For the Force, then all of us.